Welcome to Tech Fusion. I am Hassan. Do not despise the days of little beginnings. Being small is the best time to make your mistakes and develop the philosophy that can help you achieve a truly global company. On this episode, we will showcase a company virtually involved in so many things and yet successful in almost all of them. Let us join Cold Fusion as we see the journey of one of the most versatile companies in the world.
Let me ask you a question. Who built this building? It's the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, currently the world's tallest building. Okay, not quite sure. What about this one? These are the Petronas Towers, two iconic skyscrapers in Malaysia. Well, as it turns out, Samsung built all of those skyscrapers. Sometimes when you look beneath the surface, fact is often stranger than fiction. The year is 1938, and the Western financial system was still recovering from one of the greatest crashes in history, and a second world war was about to break out. It wasn't such a rosy time, but regardless, in this year, a lesser-known man by the name of Lee Chul was about to change the course of history. He founded a little company called Samsung, a trading company that dealt with local groceries and had 40 employees. At the time, the company produced noodles, then expanded into sugar, and then wool. And by the late 1950s, the company had moved into insurance, securities, and retail. In the late 1960s, Samsung moved into electronics, and the first ever product produced by Samsung Electronics was actually a 12-inch black and white TV in 1970. By 1983, the first Samsung computer had arrived. This computer was a full 2 years ahead of Windows PCs. In the 90s, Samsung began to rise as an international force in many industries.
Is my new computer going to be outdated in 6 months?
Not with the new Samsung Note Master. Its unique CPU can be easily replaced, so you can keep updating and stop worrying.
The company went from strength to strength, becoming market leaders by learning the trades of various industries through persistence. In the end, they became one of the most versatile companies in world history. Today, many of us use Samsung products in our daily lives, from TVs to computers to smartwatches and digital cameras, to fridges and kitchenware, to the chips that run our mobile phones, to the actual phones themselves. While this diversity is very impressive for just one company, just how big is Samsung? And what else are they involved in? Well, make yourself comfortable, guys, and get ready to be surprised. Samsung is much bigger than you think. In this video, we'll take a look at some of the awesome facts about the company and then take a look at its mind-boggling size. Trust me, it gets pretty crazy. Like most of the stuff on this channel, this is the stuff you're not going to see anywhere else on YouTube. Let's get into it.
Number 5.
Since 1993, Samsung Electronics has been the largest producer of memory chips in the world. In fact, the original iPhone and numerous other devices run on Samsung manufactured chips. In addition to this, in 2011, Samsung became the world's largest smartphone manufacturer.
Number 4.
In Korean, the word Samsung means 3 stars. The founder of Samsung Group wanted to indicate that the company was big, powerful, and numerous. The stars also stood for eternity. Have a look at this logo. Do you notice the opening on both ends of the ellipse where the letters S and G are located? This is intended to illustrate the company's open-mindedness and desire to communicate with the world.
Number 3.
Starting from 2006, Samsung remained the largest television manufacturer in the world. They are also the largest manufacturers of LCD panels, and today, 98% of the AMOLED screen market is dominated by Samsung. For those of you wondering, AMOLED is a type of screen that doesn't require a backlight like typical LCD screens.
Number 2.
The company spent $14 billion in research and development in just 2014 alone. Another interesting thing, the S at the end of the Galaxy S series stands for super smart.
Number 1.
Samsung has 490,000 employees, more employees than Apple, Google, and Microsoft combined.
Bonus.
In 1995, Samsung invested $2 million into the clothing brand Fubu, just as they were about to go under. Fubu has generated $6 billion in sales since.
The Note 7 was supposed to be a story of refinement, the moment when years of experimentation, trial and error seemed to converge on the perfect size, function and form for a large-screen phone tablet. Samsung's marketing campaign engine was firing on all cylinders, only to have the product that they were selling burst into flames while charging due to a battery defect. With the iPhone 7's release just around the corner, this couldn't have come for a worse time for Samsung Mobile. The exploding phones weren't due to faulty charging cables, it was the faulty devices themselves. One man from Perth, Australia had his Note 7 explode, charring his hotel room bed sheets and carpets. The hotel charged him almost $2,000 for damages, and Samsung agreed to pay. Samsung has issued some statements on the problem, as well as issuing a recall and temporary halting of sales. According to reports, Samsung designed the Galaxy Note 7 battery cell, but the production was delegated to third parties. It's claimed that one of these third-party manufacturers has produced the battery present in faulty units. The technical details haven't been released yet, but perhaps it's fair that the battery manufacturer takes on some of the costs of the recall, and that's not going to be cheap. We'll talk about the costs later. The following is a statement from a Samsung spokesperson, quote, "As of September 1st, a total of 35 claims were registered with Samsung service centers, at home and abroad. Only 24 units on a scale of 1 million were affected by the battery problem. By putting our top priority on consumer safety, we have decided to halt sales of the Galaxy Note 7 and offer new replacement handsets to all customers." End quote. It's said that 2.5 million Galaxy Note 7 handsets have already been sold and will need to be recalled as a part of this exploding battery fault. So, what does this mean for Samsung? When asked about the recall's financial impact on the company, Samsung's mobile chief, Ko Don-jin, said it would be a heartbreaking amount, end quote. The recall and phone replacement to 2.5 million Note owners is set to cost Samsung at least $1 billion by some analyst estimates. While this sounds like a lot, for Samsung, that only represents about 5% of the firm's net income for 2016. Not ideal, but not the end of the road for the company either. However, the cost is not only in lost inventory, their market value and consumer confidence will also take a hit. Investor concerns saw the share price drop in reaction to the news. Samsung's market share initially dropped by $7 billion when the news was first announced, before regaining some ground. That being said, this kind of volatility is expected as the speculative markets of today are extremely twitchy. All that I've mentioned hasn't included the competition. Even with no headphone jack, the new iPhone 7, rumoured to have 3GB of RAM and a 25% faster CPU, as well as larger storage options, will take advantage of some of the lost potential Samsung sales. The whole scenario could just be a blessing for Apple. So in conclusion, even though this is a third-party manufacturer's fault, it's still a Samsung branded phone, and they should have tested all of this during the quality control phase of production before actually selling the product. As highlighted earlier, consumer confidence will be damaged, and I personally can imagine many risk-averse type of individuals staying away from the Note 7 even when the problem has been fixed.
It seems that Samsung is planning to produce an 11K mobile screen. This surely is ridiculous. Has the technology department at the South Korean company finally just lost the plot? It may seem that way, but let's find out more. According to Korea IT News, Samsung is teaming up with over 13 local and international companies to try and have 11K display phones by 2018. What's interesting here is that the South Korean government itself is investing $26.5 million over the course of 5 years to make this a reality, which I think puts a slightly nationalistic spin on things. But more on this later. So an 11K resolution is obviously hard for us to fathom as people living in 2015. Today's technology of 2.5K phones pales in comparison. So let's put the screen into perspective. You guys out there who love specs may get a kick out of this. Assuming in 2018 that we have similar screen sizes like we have today, an 11K display would have a resolution of about 11520 by 6480 pixels, with a pixel density of 2250 ppi. For comparison, a Galaxy S6, which is the sharpest phone at the moment, has 577 ppi, and an iPhone 6 has 407. Put in pixel terms, this screen would have a whopping 74 megapixels. A modern 1080p screen is about 2 megapixels, and a 4K display is about 8 megapixels. So that's all well and good, but the question must be asked, and this is probably what you're all wondering, what is the point? Well, the point actually may not be what you think. What you're about to hear is the primary point, according to Samsung's display executive, Chu Hee-yong, and I quote, "We are hoping that we are able to show these technologies at the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in Korea." End quote. It's basically primarily to show off South Korea's technological prowess on the world stage while everyone is looking. You can now see why the South Korean government has a direct interest in this. Yong goes on to say, quote, "Although some might think that 11K is over-specification that consumers do not need, this can work as a basis for the Korean display industry to take another leap if related materials and parts improve through this." End quote. So basically, the secondary goal is that Samsung wants to move the whole display industry forward. So is it possible? Well, at the moment, it's hard to say directly on my end, but I'd assume that with $26 million of direct funding, a lot of progress will no doubt be made. So another question that's quite important, what about the practical uses? What is such a high-resolution screen on a mobile phone going to be useful for? Well, one obvious use is mobile virtual reality, an area where today's 2.5 screens fall well short of the clarity needed to mimic real life. Another such application is mobile convergence, where a user can make use of mirrored projection on a much larger screen size, with external inputs such as a keyboard and mouse. Okay, but obviously there's going to be some drawbacks, right? What are the negatives? Well, obviously, the more pixels you have, the more power it takes to keep them lit, and the harder the onboard graphics unit has to work to change all those pixels. So we'll see a massive decrease in performance and power efficiency. However, this may be offset by the growth in mobile performance by 2018, which could be anywhere from 4 to 16 times more capable than current day devices. So what's the conclusion here? Well, if I may inject some personal opinion, I think 11K is overkill, to be honest. I think 4K resolution should be a happy ultimate screen specification for 2018 and beyond. But then again, I could be completely wrong. After all, Bill Gates famously stated in 1981 that 640 kilobytes of RAM should be enough for anyone.
So we all know 16 terabytes is about 16,000 gigabytes, but how much storage is that exactly? Here's a nice visualization to give you an idea. Please note that this visualization was made in 2008 and was for 12 terabytes. So I've gone ahead and put the extra 33% storage on top to make it 16 terabytes, and the updated numbers are about 7 billion single-spaced typewritten pages, 3,500 DVDs, or 12.8 human brains, and that's according to Raymond Kurzweil's estimate of the human brain's functional memory. Okay, so 16 terabytes is a lot. Well, almost 16. Technically, 15.38 of the total 16 terabytes is actual user storage. That aside, the most amazing thing is that this hard drive is not a hard disk drive, but a solid state drive, the kind that has no moving parts and are much faster than the traditional spinning disk drives. Samsung first announced the drive in April of 2015 and creatively titled it the PM1633A. It's only 2.5 inches in width, but has a read-write speed of 1.2 gigabytes a second. That's so fast that it needs 16 gigabytes of DRAM and specially designed firmware to make it all tick along. By comparison, the largest conventional single-unit hard drives made by Seagate and Western Digital currently max out at 8 to 10 terabytes. So the question is, how did Samsung do it? Well, this unprecedented 16 gigabytes of storage on a single SSD is enabled by Samsung's new 32GB NAND flash die technology. The company has managed to cram 48 layers of these into a single die using 3D VNAND technology. The simplest way of describing 3D NAND is to imagine everything turned on its side. So instead of having just one layer of memory cells in a single plane, you can now have dozens of layers of cells, all standing up next to each other. The V in VNAND refers to the vertical nature of the cells. Samsung claims that 3D VNAND chip technology is more reliable than its predecessors while performing faster and more efficiently. They go on to say that due to their new technology, all 15.36 terabytes of usable data can be rewritten daily without failure. In the press release, Samsung stated that this drive is purely for the enterprise market, so that's bad news for PC enthusiasts. Though we can expect this technology to trickle down into consumer drives in the future. There's no pricing yet available, but rest assured it's going to cost a fair bit, but at least the technology now exists. Further to this, with time, once expensive storage methods usually come down to an affordable price. Perhaps in 2 to 5 years, we could see this kind of storage hit the price point south of $300 if recent history is any indication. Speaking of history, for a wider context and a quick bit of fun, let's see where we've come from in terms of storage. Check out this IBM 305 hard drive from 1956. The 305 was composed of 50 24-inch discs stacked together, taking up 16 square feet of real estate, and it weighed a literal ton, and it cost about $160,000 and stored, get this, 5 megabytes of data. As time rolled on, storage capacity managed to increase, and by 1979, 250 megabyte hard drives existed, and you're looking at one now. As the 80s rolled around, the hard disk drive format found a great synergy with the personal computer. Here's a 10 megabyte hard drive from 1981. That price you're looking at is over $8,000 adjusted for inflation. And finally, one more fact. It took 51 years to get to 1 terabyte of hard disk storage, which was achieved in 2007. Just 2 years later, in 2009, we had the first 2 terabyte drive. So, while it took 51 years to reach the first terabyte, the second terabyte took just 2 years. Now in 2016, with 2 terabyte drives becoming fairly commonplace and relatively cheap, we clearly live in the future.
Stuff. But let's go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. Things get a lot crazier. So, just how big is Samsung? Well, in terms of money, the company made $305 billion in revenue in 2014. So is that good or not so good? We need a bit of a yardstick here. So how much was Apple's revenue in 2014? It was actually $183 billion. And what about Google? Only $66 billion. Well, that's not all. Samsung is 17% of Korea's entire GDP. So the question must be asked, how do they make such ridiculous amounts of money to dwarf even Google? Well, here's the secret. Samsung is actually made up of 80 different businesses and affiliates. These businesses are commercially and legally independent, but unified by sharing a single philosophy. Here are some of them. Under the category of engineering and construction, we have Samsung Engineering and Construction, Samsung Trading and Investment, and Samsung Heavy Industries. For electronics, we have Samsung Electronics, Samsung Electromechanics, TechWin, a military arm, Samsung Mobile Display, and Samsung Digital Imaging, to name a few. For finance, we have Samsung Life Insurance, Securities, Investment Trust Management, Venture Investment. There's also a chemical branch, Samsung Petrochemicals, Samsung BP Chemicals. There's actually plenty of others as well, like a marketing company called Cheryl Industries. Samsung also has a hotel and resort business, a medical center, Economic Research Institute, a foundation of culture, a life and welfare foundation. In a joint venture with Renault, the company also has been making cars for 20 years, and the list goes on and on and on. Okay, so it's starting to get a little bit crazy, but what are some other lesser known things about Samsung, and what else are they doing? Well, you are in for a treat. So we've already mentioned that Samsung builds skyscrapers, but what else? Well, under Samsung's branch, Samsung TechWin, the company also does surveillance, aeronautics, automations, and weapons technology. Some of the weapons technology that Samsung has made includes a South Korean military robot designed to replace human counterparts in the demilitarized zone at the South and North Korean border. And that's not all. Samsung has also made the K9, a full-fledged army tank. And if that wasn't enough, Samsung also makes jet engines. But let's turn things up a notch. As it turns out, Samsung Heavy Industries has the most efficient shipbuilding center in the entire world. It is over 400 million square feet in size. And these are some of the ships that Samsung have built over the years. As you can see by comparing them to a regular ship, these are absolute giants, colossal floating cities almost. And if that's not enough, Samsung runs the biggest theme park in Korea, complete with a zoo and various other crazy things. Samsung's size is so ridiculous that there's even a Samsung City. This city contains a few of the company's businesses. Some other cool things include their very own clothing line and a brand new research lab for drones, robotics, 3D printing and virtual reality. The cool thing about this lab is it's actually going to be part of Samsung's mobile division, but it's going to operate independently and it's going to build on the work that Samsung has done through their robot vacuum cleaners. And let's not forget virtual reality in general. The Gear VR was the first proper mobile virtual reality headset, and I just got it the other day and have been playing around with it, and it actually works pretty well. Okay, so we're reaching towards the end of the video, so maybe you're starting to get the picture now that Samsung does just more than TVs, fridges and phones. They do pretty much everything. In all my time of doing videos, I've never come across so many surprises in my research, and I'm not saying this to be a fanboy or anything like this, it's just a matter of looking at how many things they do. Who would have known that the same company that dominates the smartphone industry also makes jet engines and military equipment, builds some of the world's biggest ships, built the world's biggest skyscraper, has a medical research facility, a theme park, a finance institution, and the list goes on and on. It's said that every year Samsung donates $100 million to its non-profit medical center, which consists of several hospitals and medical research facilities. So in conclusion, it would seem that Samsung is the kind of company that tries their hand at almost everything and chooses to observe and iterate until they get better and eventually become the market leaders. In all honesty, it is amazing how much of a dark horse this company is. I wouldn't be surprised if most people out there are only aware of Samsung electronics and their home appliances. It's amazing to think that all of this just started from one man with his small trading company dealing in groceries. So, if you have a Samsung phone, the next time you look at it, it might just seem a little bit different now that you know the true size of the company that made it.
Yes, Samsung. You may be the next incubator of the next big idea. Hold it, explore it, build it, and if you need help, come to the Technology Hub. You can be the next big idea. These are people like you and me. Dream it. Yes, you can achieve it. Until we see you again in another fusion of technology and ideas, keep dreaming and make it happen.